Well, howdy, partner. Welcome to the headquarters of Sunset Sarsaparilla Company. Wrangle up a stool and listen to old Festus jaw a while. Today we're talking about Fallout New Vegas. We're talking about Sunset Sarsaparilla, and I'm going to make some sarsaparilla. I want to say, too, that I've actually had a serious interest in making soft drinks for a long time, and the Sunset Sarsaparilla seemed like an opportune moment to do that. So there's no alcohol in this episode. I don't want to alarm you. I know some people were a little bit surprised the last time that happened. Just letting you know up front, no alcohol. Just making real sarsaparilla from scratch. I'm going to lean pretty heavily on the work that Glen from Glen and Friends Cooking did. A great cooking channel. He's made a lot of soft drinks on there. Sunset Sarsaparilla was introduced to the Fallout world in Fallout New Vegas, the best 3D Fallout, kind of as a competitor and an alternative to Nuka-Cola, really tied into kind of the Old West setting sort of vibe, the Old West sci-fi setting that New Vegas had. Of course, in Fallout setting, we use bottle caps as currency. However, sarsaparilla bottle caps are kind of kept separate because there's a game-long side quest to collect Sunset Sarsaparilla bottle caps that have a blue star underneath, as you can see here. I've got a couple of them here, so please don't shoot me for them. I hope I'm not spoiling too much by letting you know that the reward for completing this quest is to have Festus tell you the legend of the star, the legend of how Sunset Sarsaparilla was founded. And it goes a little something like this. Long ago, people didn't have a heap of choices when it came to soft drinks. It was either water or Nuka-Cola. One day, a man, a saloon owner in a small town of ours, suggested the man make a sarsaparilla flavored drink. The stranger said thinking that the drink would make him rich, and the stranger promised to meet him by sundown the next day. The next morning, the sheriff stopped by and reported that the stranger's body was found on the side of the road. He'd been killed after he locked all the doors. He turned around to find an unfamiliar bottle on the bar with a note beneath it. The note was sealed with blue wax in the shape of a star. Sampling the bottle's contents and finding it singularly delicious, the man gave silent thanks to his mysterious benefactor wherever he was. He was dead. Being an honorable man, the saloon owner paid for the stranger's funeral, thinking it was the least he could do to repay him. The saloon owner went on to become rich, selling the new drink, and to this day, some bottles of Sunset Sarsaparilla have a blue star under their caps. So this is the official corporate legend for Sunset Sarsaparilla. I think it's a very interesting choice. If you're going to set out to write a corporate legend for yourself, that you would write one that very strongly implies your founder murdered his early partner to steal the profits and recipe from him, because that is a very suspicious story. The other thing about it that I think is hilarious is
it was either water or Nuka-Cola.
We know from other places in the game that Sunset Sarsaparilla was founded around 1919. Nuka-Cola wasn't founded until 2044 in the game. So we know all of this is lies, right? It doesn't matter. I'm going to say that it was founded in 1919 because I think that's actually, you pick that up on computers and stuff like that. That's actually like the real founding date of the company is 1919. The rest of that is obviously a ridiculous legend or possibly a story that covers up a very horrific murder. He had a partner and he didn't want to share the profits with him, so he killed him. Covered it up as bandits. So the thing is that A&W Rootbeer was also founded in 1919, so I kind of feel like sarsaparilla might be a stand-in for that. A&W now, if you look at the ingredients, is high fructose corn syrup and root beer extract. It's pretty, I hate to slander them, but from my understanding, it does not, there's nothing in there that's like a good quality craft sarsaparilla. A lot of people cite Sioux City sarsaparilla.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Sioux City is often cited as a good sarsaparilla. Sioux City, I find, it actually has a lot of vanilla for my taste. I think that you would blindfolded call this a vanilla drink. The other thing I brought out is Moxie. And I bring this up because Moxie is, I think, probably the oldest bottled soft drink in America. It was established in 1884, predates Coke by a long time. Moxie is weird. I think it's really interesting, and I haven't made a drink using it as a mixer yet. I feel like it should be in bars because Moxie is bitters, basically. The primary ingredient in flavoring this is gentian. It gives this a really unique, dry, biting flavor. Gentian is a primary ingredient in a lot of bitters recipes. One of my concerns in making the Sunset Sarsaparilla recipe on my show here is, what am I doing other than putting it in a bottle that says Sunset Sarsaparilla, that makes it somehow unique as a sarsaparilla. Otherwise, why would I not just make this video, how to make homemade sarsaparilla, which is a topic that's been covered. It had to be somewhat, I had to think about what the recipe should be and how that would be a little bit different. And I think that actually throwing a little bit of gentian in there to add a little bit of bite to this takes it away from a standard sarsaparilla in a way that is also in keeping with market tastes of the time. I really, it turns out, love sassafras. And sassafras is the primary ingredient in sarsaparilla. The smell of sassafras is basically like high-powered root beer, if you're familiar with the flavor of root beer. And what's the difference between a root beer and a sarsaparilla? I think it's like how a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square. I think that anything that you brew up from a bunch of different roots would technically qualify as a root beer, although here in America, we generally understand it to be one that is primarily flavored with sassafras. That's the dominant flavor. If you look at old recipes that we find for sarsaparilla, they all call for sassafras, and in a lot of the cases, only sassafras. So that throws a wrench in the works here because there's something called sarsaparilla root. Why doesn't sarsaparilla call so heavily for sarsaparilla root? Glen ponders this exact same question in his video. I have a possible answer. I don't know for sure. It could be that sarsaparilla root was named after people had already been drinking sarsaparilla. And they found this root and said, that reminds me of a sarsaparilla. Let's call that sarsaparilla root, even though sarsaparilla was already being made with sassafras. That could be the case. Nonetheless, sarsaparilla root will be used here. I use it a little bit less. I find that sarsaparilla root has a late arriving flavor that I don't love too much. And this is the most unflattering thing I could say about something. It kind of reminds me of the smell of a pulp mill working in the distance, like that rotting cabbage smell. I don't know if you've ever been on a long road trip and you drive past a pulp mill, you always know that smell. Ooh. So I really wanted a sassafras forward one, and I definitely wanted that tinge of gentian. I think that combo actually offsets really well. I'm super pleased with how this is going to come out. There is an argument to be made that you don't want to use sassafras ever. Sassafras is a controlled substance. I mean, it's very easy to buy online. I'm going to provide an affiliate link down below. I'm obligated to inform you that it has been found to be carcinogenic. If you look into the research on that, it's one of those things where, like, yes, we injected rats with like billions of milliliters of sassafras extract, and eventually they got cancer sometimes. It takes a lot of sassafras.
A lot. A whole hell of a lot.
You, of course, have to be your own judge about what is healthy and acceptable for you. I'm unconcerned about it from my readings on this entirely. It's about as carcinogenic as cinnamon or nutmeg, which we don't control. I've also read somewhere, and I haven't really looked into this, but I just cursorily saw it. Oh, that could be true. Sassafras might be a precursor involved in creating MDMA, and that might be a reason that they put it on a kind of a watch list so that they can track sales and stockpiles of the stuff. But I'm pretty sure that Sunset Sarsaparilla has real sassafras in it because of this silly old advisory that you can get Festus to tell you, which goes like this. Excessive ingestion of sarsaparilla can lead to deleterious effects, including but not limited to kidney damage, nausea, digital numbness, anxiety, loss of visual acuity, dizziness, occasional nosebleeds, joint inflammation, tooth decay, sore throat, bronchitis, organ rupture, and halitosis. So the fact that they had to include a silly old advisory kind of indicates to me that maybe they were using the real deal sassafras, and that Sunset Sarsaparilla was a naturally brewed, real deal, Old West sarsaparilla. And I'm actually really happy with how my sarsaparilla syrup came out. We're gonna make a sarsaparilla syrup, and then we will strain and filter that, and we will reserve a portion of that for use as a syrup in cocktails or whatever. In the interest of doing this as authentically and Old Westy as I can, we're gonna use most of our syrup to make a naturally fermented, bottle-conditioned sarsaparilla, like a saloon owner would have made in his off hours, or between shifts, I guess, in his saloon to supply his patrons with sarsaparilla. Okay, so I'm gonna start with 40 grams of sassafras. I'm gonna provide affiliate links to all of these ingredients in a shopping list in the pinned comment below. Okay, so I've got 40 grams of sassafras. I'll put that in my pot. And I want 15 grams of sarsaparilla root. Yeah, sarsaparilla, much less of that root beer kind of bite smell, very vanilla, cinnamon, definitely some of that sassafrassiness, but way less strong than sassafras. And then it does have like a little bit of a weird thing at the very end. So 15 grams of sarsaparilla root. I want 5 grams of cinnamon stick, which usually works out to about 1 stick. And that's a light one, so we're going to use 2. Perfect, on the money. Crumble those if you can. 10 grams of licorice root. I want 450 grams of demerara sugar, which I have a funny feeling is basically this whole bowl. That wasn't enough. We're going to need more demerara sugar, so 450 grams. Okay. 450 total grams of demerara sugar. And this is the gentian root. If you smell it, it just smells like bitter, angry dirt. It does. I mean, I know that sounds like crazy, but it does smell like dirt, like that dirt under your fingernails. This is a very easy ingredient to use too much of. It's a powerful flavor. We're going to use 1 gram. That's all it is. I mean, it's a very small amount, but it really has a pronounced effect on the flavor. And actually now, to do the next measurement, I'm going to put my pot over here on the scale. And I want to add 1 liter of water, otherwise known as 1,000 grams of water. I'm going to heat this up to a boil and melt that sugar, and then we're going to turn it off and let it just steep. Okay, so this, as you can see it, I hope you can see the steam coming off it, but we've gotten this up to temperature, we've dissolved our sugar, and now I'm just going to let it sit there together for about 5-10 minutes. I mean, I think 10 or 20 minutes ideally, but we're doing TV here. We want to move a little quickly. So while that simmers, or while that brews and steeps, I'm going to make my ginger bug. This is a mechanism for harvesting and cultivating natural yeasts without just going out and buying yeasts. If you had a saloon in the old day, you might be able to get some yeast bought mail order from the, what's that called? The catalog. The Wells Fargo wagon is a coming down.
Please let it be for me.
And so what I'm looking for is, you know, a knob of ginger like that. Glen gave rough measurements on this when he did it, and I think that you don't need to be super exact is the point. The one thing he did say, and it's obvious to me, do not peel this ginger. What you want is actually on the outside of the ginger. I haven't tried it yet, but thinking about it, I wonder if you could make a sassafras bug, because the stuff's on the roots. I mean, these are all roots. I don't know how washed they are. They may still have active yeast cultures on them. We might be able to just, I'll look into that in the interim and I'll have an update. I'm going to try and make a bug from licorice or from whatever, because we're going to provide our own sugar. So basically, if it's on there and we feed it sugar and water, it'll grow. That's the idea. And I'm going to want a jar to put it in. This is a perfect jar for this, except for one thing. We must remove this gasket. If we don't remove the gasket, we're going to have a real problem here. If we are successful in creating a ginger bug, there will be a lot of gases, carbon dioxide, and then this will explode if it's a sealed unit. The other side of that too is that if it doesn't explode, the pressure gets to a certain point, that'll kind of kill our yeast. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this up. You know, this ain't rocket science, right? Okay, I'm going to put what I estimate is about 50 grams of ginger. 30 to 50 seems to be okay. And now I want to add some water and some plain sugar. One thing that I'm going to bring up that it would never occur to me to bring up, except that Glen brings it up, and I hope I'm not cribbing too much. If you're going to use it, don't use an artificial sweetener here. It just won't work. The yeast will only be able to eat sugar. And we're going to add, you know, some sugar. You want to be careful about putting too much yeast sugar in there all at once. Glen does a much better talk about this. But if you put too much sugar in, you create a toxic environment. The yeast can't live. If you don't give them enough food, they're not going to thrive, etc. And that's it. Stir it up. Shake it up now and then. Glen has a Magna stir because he's a brewer and he uses that all the time, and he just lets his stir kind of continually. You want to get a lot of oxygen in there. It kind of helps it out. But I gotta say, I didn't have a Magna stir, and I think I did okay. And then leave that on the counter, you know, at room temperature. I started this ginger bug about 2 weeks ago, and there it is. Now I've fed that a lot more. I've fed a lot more water to it, and you can see too, the difference in the clarity of the water is dramatic. This is like a pinkish yellow, and this is clear water. So every day for about 5 days, I'm going to add more ginger and sugar to this. I started with a bigger batch here, that's why this is so much bigger. And the reason you want to feed it is because if you throw too much sugar and too much ginger all at once, the environment goes out of whack and it doesn't work for them. I'm not real clear on the science. For me, this is a magic spell that I'm performing, okay? It's just sorcery, and it worked. So add to that for 5 days, and then after that, you've got it. Just put it in the fridge and feed it once a week, and you should be good to go. You should have a good active yeast culture going on. And then we're going to use this when we... there's some stuff going on in here, you know. We're going to use this when we make our naturally fermented sodas. Yeah, that smells like vinegar. That has a real kind of a foot-like vinegar smell. Still some ginger in there. Glen tasted his. Let's taste ours. Let's see how he did. Oh boy. He hated his. I have to say, mine's actually not the most unpleasant thing I've ever drank. He reacted really viscerally to his, so maybe my yeast isn't as good. Maybe I did a not so great job. I actually find that to be a pretty, almost like the beginnings of a mild root beer, a ginger beer, which is actually, it's a good way to start a naturally fermented ginger beer. So we'll put these guys back here. This is pretty well good and steeped now, so let's strain it off and bottle it. So I'm going to strain this and filter it, and the way I'm going to do that is a little bit wonky. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants as always here. Let's stick a coffee filter into my funnel. I am going to hold a double strainer over the top because we definitely don't want to send huge chunks into our filter, and we're going to do our utmost. Oh boy. So we've got our sarsaparilla syrup here. Has a beautiful brownish red color. Love that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a measure of this right now. There's a few roots I can see that got through. I'll want to refilter this before I really, do much with it. But there's our sarsaparilla syrup. Triple that volume, or quadruple that volume, I should say, with seltzer to make a cold sarsaparilla. That looks delicious. Look at that beautiful foamy head. I definitely need to filter this again. There's some flakes floating around in there, but for our purposes, right, and I will when camera stops rolling, but for now, let's just move along. They're delicious. You get a definite bite from the gentian, which is crazy because there's only 1 gram in that whole thing, right? And plenty of sweetness without being overly too sweet. Plenty of that sarsaparilla root beer flavor. Kind of dances on your tongue and tingles. I enjoy that thoroughly. So when you want to make a naturally fermented version of that, we would combine our syrup, 1 part syrup to 3 parts water, and then we're going to use 75 milliliters of our ginger bug for every 2 liters of our mix. Dole that out into sanitized beer bottles and cap them right away. Leave them on the counter for a few days and test one every day, which stinks because it means you're going to go through a bottle every day. And when you have the level of carbonation and fermentation that you're looking for, put the whole thing into the fridge. It'll send the yeasts to sleep and you'll stop the process. Generally speaking, this natural process of fermentation isn't going to yield a high level of alcohol. This is how you make a small beer. A small beer is an old term for soft drinks because they were all fermented at one time. You would struggle using this method to get anything over 1.2, 1.5% alcohol by volume. Glen actually did a test of that himself. He was really surprised to find how low the alcohol content was after even like a week of fermenting this way. He thought that he was going to find much higher quantities. There probably is a way to make an actual sarsaparilla beer. You would use different yeasts. You would use like fermenter vats, and then you would probably do a second fermentation in the bottle to carbonate them. And then that would get you something that would be like 18% alcohol, like a champagne, but would also probably be disgusting. I don't think it would be not good at all. In my effort to make sarsaparilla, Sunset Sarsaparilla, I got these printer sheets and I designed up a little label and I printed these on there, and this makes a label and a collar. In truth, if you really wanted to go super authentic, you would use a like wheat paste, I think, kind of label. That's what a real beer bottle label uses. These are pretty good. Certainly there's a better way to go if you really want to. And I would actually, normally I would do that after filling the bottles anyway. You'd fill your bottles first, label them, or cap them and label them. I also happen to have the Sunset Sarsaparilla caps. I got those from an Etsy store. I'll provide a link to that shop online. They seem like they're pretty good caps. As far as them being, oxygen absorbing and all the things that you want a beer bottle cap to do, I think they are. I'm not a scientist, so I have no reason to suspect that they're not. And so these three bottles of Sunset Sarsaparilla represent a portion of my big batch that I made for this episode. I'm really excited to open one of these up and test it and see how it came out. And we'll compare it against our syrupy version. Ooh, I got a little hiss there on the opening. That was nice. Maybe we should pour it. Let's see. A little hiss. Very light carbonation I'm seeing in there. I'm not a master at this yet. I have a long way to go, but I'm definitely seeing some kind of action in there. Pretty cool. Oh, that's interesting. I love that. It is pleasantly sweet. Definitely, I would classify this as what I got here as being a sarsaparilla or root beer. Very different from what's on the market today. It's a little bit more mild. So the yeasts are eating the sugars while they're in there doing their thing. Certainly, if you compare it to this, you can see that there's a completely different color that has occurred. This has changed them over time, the exposure to yeast. They have the same amount of syrup in each one. The other ingredient I added to this when I bottled it, I really liked a little acid phosphate in them. I think Glen used citric acid. I liked the way the acid phosphate worked, and so it made it like a sarsaparilla phosphate. I thought that was excellent. And so I forgot to add that to this. At the time of bottling, I bottled each one with 3 drops of acid phosphate in the bottle before I added the syrup. That was the best way for me to dole out the measurements and figure out, to get it to the way I want it to be. That does brighten the overall flavor a great deal. So now properly made with its acid phosphate, definitely getting more bubbles on the forced carbonation version. Much sharper, much more in-your-face root beer taste here. This is a much more mellow taste. And maybe for a naturally fermented one, if I was to keep iterating on this, you would want to use a different ratio of syrup to water. Maybe it's more like 50-50 or something like that. Or 2 parts water to 1 part syrup instead of 3 parts water to 1 part syrup. This tastes much more like a commercially available root beer or sarsaparilla today. In fact, we have our Sioux City sarsaparilla right here. I don't even say that's pretty close to that. This has different bubblegumish, late arriving flavors. Probably burdock root, I think. I enjoy this thoroughly. I would love to see more carbonation out of it, and I'm going to do some research on that. Probably my ginger bug wasn't the greatest, although that's pretty bugged out as far as I can tell. Definitely still get that slight bite from the gentian. Overall, though, this is really cool because this is a very mellow smoothness to it. The texture overall has changed from the yeast. I really enjoy this. It goes well with rum, too. I can tell you that from other experience on the show. Root beer and rum turns out to be a great drink. So that's my version of a Sunset Sarsaparilla. Essentially, a naturally brewed sarsaparilla with a touch of gentian. I think that sets it apart enough to make it a unique product category, and I'm trademarking it today. I don't have that option. I don't have that ability. If you enjoyed this episode, I really hope you'll check out Glen and Friends Cooking. He has a great show, deserves your attention. Really fun to watch that guy and his wife in their kitchen doing their thing. I love the work they do, and thank you, Glen, for being the chief inspiration for this one. I hope I didn't steal it from you too heavily. And check them out. They're great. I'm going to put a link there in the pinned comment below, up here in the info thingy, and at the end of the episode, probably too. I've done a bunch of stuff from Fallout so far because I love Fallout, and it seems like all of you guys love Fallout too. I did a Stimpack shot. I did a Dirty Wastelander. We did a Sierra Madre Martini. And if we do Fallout again, we're going to finally do the Big Daddy, Nuka-Cola. I wanted to do this one as a warm-up. Every time I'm doing a Fallout game, I want to go play Fallout New Vegas again, so I'm probably going to be doing that over on my Twitch at twitch.tv/GregFromHTD. I hope you will check it out, and I'll see you there. I'd love to hang out with you. I'm on Twitter at How to Drink. I'm on Instagram at How to Drink. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/howtodrink. I'm going to leave you with this thought today, which is, as I always like to say, as we all like to say, patrolling the Mojave really makes you wish for a nuclear winter. Why don't you wrangle up a bar stool and let old Festus tell you the tale of Sunset Sarsaparilla. Comes from the Gilded Age of the turn of the century when a man could do what he wanted, and a feller whose name is lost to the ages of time decided to set out to start a sarsaparilla company with a man who had a recipe, and he murdered that man for that recipe, and then he covered it up by paying off the sheriff of the local town. And now today we celebrate that story by fictionalizing. This is all fiction anyway. It just seemed very likely that that guy was a murderer.